There is a specific kind of silence that descends on military establishments when something happens that no prepared statement can adequately address. Not the silence of ignorance, not the silence of an institution waiting for more information before it speaks. The silence of three governments that know exactly what happened, know exactly what the other two know, and have collectively decided that the version of events that can be publicly acknowledged is not the version of events that actually occurred. That silence descended on Washington, Tel Aviv, and Amman on the morning of March 24th. An F-15 was shot down over Iranian airspace. The wreckage is on the ground in Khuzestan province, approximately 60 kilometers northeast of Avaz. Iranian state television has broadcast footage of it. The aircraft is identifiably an F-15. The twin-tailed configuration unmistakable even in the condition the wreckage is in. The ejection seat has been deployed. The pilot is not in the wreckage. Iran says it shot down an American F-15 and has captured the pilot. The United States says it has no F-15s operating in the theater that are unaccounted for. Israel says it does not comment on operational matters. Jordan has said nothing. All three statements are technically constructed to avoid being provably false, while communicating nothing accurate about what actually happened. And the gap between what those statements say and what the wreckage on the ground in Khuzestan province represents is the gap that this analysis is going to close. Because the question of whose F-15 this was and why three governments are refusing to answer it tells you something about the operational reality of this conflict that no official briefing has communicated and that the consequences of keeping hidden are already arriving. Begin with what is not in dispute. The wreckage exists. Iranian state television footage shows it in sufficient detail that the aircraft type is identifiable beyond reasonable question. The F-15 is one of the most distinctive combat aircraft ever built. Its twin vertical stabilizers, its wide fuselage, its engine nacelles, its overall proportions are recognizable in silhouette and remain recognizable even in debris field condition. Aviation analysts, military aviation journalists, and former military pilots who have reviewed the footage have reached the same conclusion independently. The aircraft in the wreckage footage is an F-15, almost certainly an F-15E Strike Eagle variant, the two-seat deep strike version based on the debris configuration visible in the footage. The ejection seat visible in the footage has been deployed. One seat, which means either a single-seat F-15C or D variant, or an F-15E in which only one of the two crew members ejected, or an F-15E in which one crew member's seat malfunctioned during ejection. Iran is claiming it has one pilot in custody. Iranian state media has not released imagery of the captured pilot. Iranian officials have stated the pilot is alive, is receiving medical attention, and will be treated in accordance with Iran's obligations. They have not stated the pilot's nationality. That omission is deliberate because stating the pilot's nationality would answer the question that three governments are currently invested in not answering. The F-15 is operated by 4 air forces in the region with the operational reach to conduct missions over Khuzestan province. The United States Air Force operates F-15C, D, and E variants and has forces deployed throughout the Gulf theater. The United States Air Force has stated that all of its F-15s operating in the theater are accounted for. That statement was carefully worded. Accounted for does not mean on the ground at their home bases. It means the Air Force knows where each aircraft is. An aircraft that crashed in Iran is an accounted for aircraft. The statement excludes nothing and confirms nothing. The Israeli Air Force operates the F-15I Ryam, Israel's indigenous variant of the F-15E Strike Eagle, with Israeli-developed avionics and weapon systems integrated into the American airframe. Israel has purchased 25 F-15Is and operates them as its primary long-range strike platform alongside the F-35I. The F-15I has the range to reach Khuzestan province from Israeli territory with aerial refueling. Israel has stated it does not comment on operational matters, which is the Israeli Air Force's standard response to every question about specific operational events it chooses not to confirm or deny. The Royal Saudi Air Force operates F-15S and F-15SA variants. Saudi Arabia has been publicly distancing itself from this conflict and has not authorized the use of its territory or its aircraft for offensive operations against Iran. Saudi involvement in a direct strike mission over Iranian territory would represent a political and strategic departure from the position Riyadh has publicly maintained. That does not make it impossible. It makes it unlikely enough that it is the least probable explanation for the Khuzestan wreckage. The Royal Jordanian Air Force operates F-16s, not F-15s. Jordan is not an F-15 operator. That leaves three realistic possibilities. A United States Air Force F-15E operating on a classified mission that the Pentagon has decided to neither confirm nor deny. An Israeli Air Force F-15I operating on a strike mission against targets in Khuzestan province. Or a joint operation, American and Israeli crews operating together in a configuration that the political sensitivities of both governments make publicly unacknowledgeable. The silence from Washington, Tel Aviv, and Amman, and the specific character of each government's non-response points toward one of these possibilities more strongly than the others. The geography of the wreckage site is the first analytical tool for understanding what was happening when this aircraft went down. Khuzestan province is in southwestern Iran, bordering Iraq to the west and the Persian Gulf to the south. It is Iran's primary oil-producing region, home to the infrastructure that supplies the majority of Iranian crude oil output and the economic foundation of the Iranian state's revenue generation. It is also the location of several Iranian military facilities that have been on Israeli and American strike target lists for years. 60 kilometers northeast of Avaz, the provincial capital, places the wreckage site in a specific operational context. At that location, the aircraft was not transiting to a target elsewhere in Iran. It was in the vicinity of specific facilities that are known to be on current strike target lists. Revolutionary Guard Command infrastructure in the Avaz region, missile production and storage facilities in the mountains north of the city, electronic warfare and air defense coordination nodes that support the Iranian military's operations throughout the southwestern theater. An aircraft that goes down 60 kilometers northeast of Avaz was either targeting something in that area, had just struck something in that area and was egressing, or was on a reconnaissance mission over that area, gathering the targeting data that a future strike would use. All three mission profiles are operationally relevant to the current conflict. All three would explain why an F-15E, with its two-seat crew configuration optimized for the weapons systems officer role required for precision strike and reconnaissance missions, would be operating in that specific location. The aircraft did not wander into Khuzestan by accident. Whatever mission it was flying, it was there deliberately, for a specific operational purpose, approved at a level of command authority that reflects the sensitivity of operations in Iranian airspace. The air defense system that shot it down is the question that the Iranian claim and the wreckage location together allow to be partially answered. Iran's air defense network in Khuzestan province is not the most sophisticated component of Iranian integrated air defense. The primary concentration of advanced systems, the S-400 elements, the most capable Bavar 373 batteries, is further north and east, protecting the nuclear facilities and the population centers that Iranian strategic planners consider highest priority. Khuzestan's air defense relies more heavily on medium-range systems, Rad and Tabas indigenous Iranian surface-to-air missile batteries, older S-300 systems whose capabilities are well documented, Pantsir S-1 short-range systems for lower altitude coverage, and the integrated radar network that provides tracking data to all of these systems through the National Air Defense Command architecture. The F-15E is not a stealth aircraft. Unlike the F-35I, it does not rely on reduced radar cross-section for survivability in contested airspace. It relies on speed, altitude, electronic warfare systems, standoff weapons employment, and when operating in this conflict, the suppression of Iranian air defenses that American electronic warfare aircraft have been conducting throughout the campaign. The fact that an F-15E was operating over Khuzestan province rather than an F-35I suggests something about the mission profile that the stealth capability of the F-35 was not the primary survivability requirement for. Reconnaissance missions using specialized sensor pods do not always require the F-35's stealth profile if the mission planning assumes sufficient electronic warfare support is degrading the radar coverage of the target area. Strikes using standoff weapons that can be released from outside the engagement envelope of known air defense systems do not always require the F-35's penetration capability if the target is within range of weapons that can be delivered from distances that keep the launch aircraft clear of the threat. The F-15E that went down over Khuzestan was operating in an environment where someone's mission planning calculated that the combination of electronic warfare support, standoff weapons range, and route selection provided sufficient survivability margin for an aircraft that is not stealthy. That calculation was wrong. The Iranian air defense system that acquired and engaged the aircraft clearly had either better radar coverage than the mission planners assessed, better electronic countermeasure capability than the jamming aircraft supporting the mission could defeat, or an engagement solution that the F-15E's defensive systems and the crew's evasive maneuvers could not defeat in the time available. The engagement geometry of how the Iranian system achieved the kill, whether through early detection at range or through a shorter range ambush engagement, would tell analysts significant information about how Iranian air defense is adapting to American electronic warfare tactics. That geometry is exactly the kind of information that would make the governments involved very reluctant to publicly confirm any details about the engagement. The pilot recovery question is where the silence of three governments produces its most immediate and most consequential consequence. Iran states it has one pilot in custody. If the aircraft is an F-15E, it had two crew members, a pilot and a weapons systems officer. Iran is claiming one. The second crew member is either dead in the wreckage, dead outside the wreckage in the ejection sequence, evading capture somewhere in Khuzestan province, or was not aboard the aircraft if this was a single-seat F-15C or D variant. The United States military's personnel recovery mission, the search and rescue and personnel recovery infrastructure that is activated whenever American military personnel are isolated in hostile territory, has a formal and rapid response protocol. That protocol is not discretionary. When an American service member is missing in hostile territory, the process of accounting for them, attempting to recover them, and protecting their welfare while in captivity is a non-negotiable institutional obligation. If the pilot in Iranian custody is an American service member, the formal personnel recovery process is already active. Intelligence assets are already working the problem. Diplomatic back channels are already carrying messages about the pilot's status and welfare. The formal SEER, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape support infrastructure is already engaged. All of that is happening whether the Pentagon confirms the pilot's existence or not. If the pilot in Iranian custody is an Israeli Air Force officer, the institutional and diplomatic dynamics are different, but the urgency is equivalent. Israel's record on recovering captured personnel, going back to the Gilad Shalit case and beyond, reflects an institutional priority that is, if anything, more intense than the American equivalent. If the pilot is neither American nor Israeli in the straightforward national sense, if this is a joint operation with a mixed crew or an arrangement whose nationality classification is itself classified, the diplomatic and institutional response becomes more complicated in ways that explain some of the specific texture of the silence coming from Washington and Tel Aviv simultaneously. The silence is not comfortable for either government. It is the silence of institutions that have an obligation to account for their personnel and are managing that obligation in private while maintaining a public posture of neither confirmation nor denial. That management is happening right now, in back channels, through third-party intermediaries, in the intelligence diplomatic space where the real negotiations about sensitive matters always occur before they become, if they ever become, matters of public record. Iran knows this. Iran is letting it happen while maintaining its public claim of having a captured pilot, because the leverage that a captured pilot represents, whether American or Israeli, is leverage that Iran is not going to sacrifice by making public statements that reduce its negotiating flexibility. The silence from Washington and Tel Aviv is confirmation that Iran's leverage is real. Governments do not maintain this specific texture of neither confirm nor deny silence about aircraft losses that carry no significant additional sensitivity beyond the loss itself. They maintain this silence when confirming the details of the loss would reveal something about the situation that increases the cost of resolving it. The question of what the F-15's mission was in the specific location where it was shot down has an answer that the geography, the timing, and the target set in Khuzestan province together suggest with reasonable confidence, even without official confirmation. Khuzestan province is where Iran's oil infrastructure is concentrated. It is where the pipelines that carry crude from the southern fields to the export terminals converge. It is where the processing facilities that prepare Iranian crude for export are located, and it is where the Iranian military has positioned the assets that support the missile and drone operations that have been the primary instrument of Iranian offensive action throughout this conflict. The timing of the shootdown, March 24th, comes 3 days after the second strike on Nevatim and on the same day that the United States and Israel were assessing their options for responding to the Nasrallah missile strike. An F-15E over Khuzestan on that date is consistent with a reconnaissance mission gathering current battle damage assessment on previously struck targets and current targeting data on priority targets for the response strike package that American and Israeli planners were developing. It is consistent with a strike mission using standoff precision weapons against Iranian military infrastructure in the Khuzestan area, whose destruction would degrade Iran's missile and drone operational capacity. It is consistent with an electronic warfare or signals intelligence mission collecting data on Iranian air defense radar emissions in the Khuzestan area, data that would inform the route planning and jamming requirements for a future strike package. All 3 mission types would explain the aircraft type, the location, and the operational timing. All 3 mission types would explain why the governments involved are maintaining the specific silence they are maintaining. And all 3 mission types would explain why Iran shot it down in the way that produces maximum political and diplomatic leverage, rather than simply announcing the kill as a straightforward military victory. Iran is not just claiming it shot down an F-15. Iran is claiming it has a pilot. The pilot is the leverage. The aircraft is the demonstration. The refusal to state the pilot's nationality is the maintenance of maximum negotiating flexibility. This is a sophisticated play, and it is being executed by a government that has been thinking about this specific scenario, American or Israeli military personnel in Iranian custody, for a long time and has a clear understanding of what that custody is worth. The American silence has a specific quality that distinguishes it from the Israeli silence, and that is analytically informative. The Pentagon's statement that all F-15s operating in the theater are accounted for was followed by no further elaboration, no press conference, no background briefing to journalists, no retired military official appearing on cable news to provide context, none of the normal institutional noise that surrounds a major military story when the institution involved is confident in its public position. That absence of noise is information. When the Pentagon is confident that its public position is accurate and complete, it generates supporting communication. Background briefings, on-background clarifications, retired officials who reflect institutional views, the normal apparatus of managing a military story that the institution is comfortable with. When the Pentagon is maintaining a public position that is technically accurate but substantively incomplete, the noise stops. Because every additional communication about the subject creates additional risk of saying something that contradicts, clarifies, or supplements the carefully constructed official statement in ways that the institution is not prepared to manage. The silence around the Pentagon's F-15 statement is the silence of an institution that has said everything it is going to say publicly about this subject and is now managing the situation in channels that are not public. The Israeli silence is different in character. Israel's standard posture of not commenting on operational matters is not unusual for this subject or for any other sensitive operational question in this conflict. But the absence of any Israeli statement at all, even a restatement of the standard non-comment posture, suggests that Israeli communications officials made a deliberate decision that any statement, including a non-comment, draws more attention to the subject than no statement at all. That is a very specific communications calculation. It is the calculation you make when the subject is sensitive enough that you want the news cycle to move past it as quickly as possible, and you have assessed that a formal non-comment statement would extend the cycle rather than close it. Jordan's complete silence is the most informative of all. Jordan has no obvious reason to comment on a reported F-15 shootdown over Iran unless Jordan has a specific connection to the aircraft or the mission that makes a comment potentially revealing. Jordan does not operate F-15s. Jordan has publicly positioned itself as a non-participant in this conflict, having been used as an airspace corridor in previous operations and having calibrated its public statements carefully to avoid being identified as an active participant. If Jordan's silence on this specific story is distinguished from its general practice of not commenting on Israeli or American military operations, if Jordanian officials have made themselves specifically unavailable on this subject on this day, that availability pattern is a data point. Governments that have nothing to hide about a specific story do not specifically manage their availability in relation to that story. The strategic consequence of an F-15 going down over Khuzestan province, regardless of whose it was and regardless of who was flying it, is not bounded by the value of the aircraft or the status of the crew. It is the operational signal that the contested airspace over Iran now extends to a threat environment that the F-15E, operating with the electronic warfare support and route planning that mission planners have been applying throughout this conflict, cannot reliably survive. This is not the same signal as the F-35 losses. The F-35 losses were significant because they demonstrated that a stealth aircraft specifically designed to operate in heavily defended airspace was being detected and engaged. The implication was that the stealth approach to airspace penetration had encountered its operational ceiling. The F-15 loss is significant because it demonstrates that the non-stealth approach, the approach that relies on electronic warfare, standoff weapons, and route planning to operate in contested airspace without a stealth signature advantage, is also encountering its operational ceiling in the current Iranian air defense environment. If stealth aircraft are being shot down and non-stealth aircraft are also being shot down, the operational conclusion is that Iranian air defense has improved to the point where the survivability calculus for all aircraft types conducting missions over Iranian territory has changed materially from the assessment that was in place when the conflict began. That conclusion, if confirmed by the operational data that is currently classified, forces a fundamental reassessment of the strike campaign's sustainability, not the sustainability of individual missions. The sustainability of conducting the volume of missions required to achieve the campaign's objectives against targets deep inside Iranian territory with acceptable loss rates using the aircraft types and employment doctrines currently in use. A campaign that loses F-35s to advanced S-400 employment and loses F-15Es to medium-tier Iranian air defense systems is a campaign whose air combat attrition rate is not sustainable over the months-long timeline that achieving the stated objectives would require. Israeli and American air power planners are doing that math right now. The math is not favorable. And the wreckage in Khuzestan province, sitting on Iranian soil, being filmed by Iranian state television, with a pilot of undisclosed nationality in Iranian custody, and 3 governments maintaining a silence whose specific character reveals more than any press conference would, is the most recent data point in a calculation that the official framing of this conflict has consistently refused to present honestly. The pilot in Iranian custody, whoever they are, is the central fact of this story. Not the aircraft, not the air defense system that shot it down, not the mission profile or the target set or the operational planning that put an F-15E over Khuzestan province on March 24th. The pilot. Because the pilot is a human being whose government has an obligation to them that does not disappear because acknowledging that obligation publicly is diplomatically inconvenient, because the pilot is a leverage point that Iran understands with complete clarity and is managing with the patience of a government that has been thinking about this scenario for a long time, because the pilot's nationality, when it eventually becomes known, will answer the question that 3 governments are currently investing significant diplomatic and institutional energy in not answering. And because the moment that answer becomes public, the specific texture of the silence that Washington, Tel Aviv, and Amman have been maintaining will be readable as confirmation of everything that the silence was designed to prevent from being confirmed. The wreckage is on the ground. The pilot is missing. 3 governments are lying about it. And the truth of whose aircraft that is and what it was doing over Khuzestan province on the morning of March 24th is sitting in the custody of the Iranian government, waiting for the moment when Iran decides that revealing it serves Iranian strategic interests more than maintaining the ambiguity that the silence of three governments is currently providing cover for. That moment will come. Subscribe to From Report and turn on notifications. When the pilot's identity is confirmed through any channel, the analysis will be here. When the diplomatic back-channel negotiations that are already underway about the pilot's status produce a result that reaches the public record, the analysis will be here. When the operational implications of losing both F-35s and F-15Es over Iranian territory in the same week force the public acknowledgement of the strike campaign's sustainability problem that the current official framing is avoiding, the analysis will be here. Evidence first. What it means for you, always. This is From Report.